Hello, welcome to Wyvern Minis. My name's Dan. I'd like to take you on a journey with me back in time to the old world, which has been brought back to life by Games Workshop. If you've watched some of my other videos, you may know that I'm a big fan of greenskins of all flavours. My first models I ever bought were these Hero Quest Orcs and Goblins, which I bought for 50p or something from a guy in the playground when I was at junior school. And that kickstarted my love of minis, the hobbying, and greenskins in particular. So I'll kick off by having a look at the books that are available. And for Old World, you've got the Ravening Hordes book for the evil armies, and the Arcane Journal for each one, which gives you a bit more flavour behind each army, which is cool. Going back to 8th edition, which is this hardback book here, and then 7th edition had this pretty cool boar boy on the front there. 6th edition, they had the Warhammer Orcs and Goblins book there, but before that they did a Ravening Hordes book, which was kind of to tide you over, because the army book stood for the 4th and 5th editions, and that was the first one I had. Prior to 4th edition, they had general army books that covered all the armies in Warhammer, including a Ravening Hordes book, which is where they got the idea for calling the new books Ravening Hordes, I think. But yeah, that original army book I think is just classic. The artwork on the front of it is fantastic. You've got this really evocative scene going on. Inside the book you've got some really great black and white sketches. It gives you a whole flavour of the Orc and Goblin army, which has stuck with me throughout all the editions. So whenever I'm constructing an army list or thinking about what I want to collect, I tend to go back to this book. The history is so rich, and you've got these detailed maps showing where the Orc and Goblin tribes live, and the rules reflect that rich history as well by having warlords that are in charge of different wars that have invaded the civilized lands of men and elves and dwarfs over time. And you can pick and choose from that rich tapestry of the history of the Warhammer world from where you want to play your games, which has been lost a little bit with the new version of the old world, where they've made it a very restricted period of time, which has benefits and drawbacks. It works in some ways to give you this kind of narrative hook to build your games from, but also it is restrictive in and of itself. Aside from having a really cool battle report in the middle of the book as well, there's all these wonderful colour pictures of miniatures I used to obsess over when I was a kid and could never afford with my pocket money. So now that they are available on a made-to-order basis, it gives me a chance to get that Orc Shaman on War Wyvern that I always coveted. I guess the question is whether Old World is purely pulling on the heartstrings of nostalgia, or whether it has something new and exciting and cool to offer to gamers and collectors. Okay, I have to admit that I was one of those old guys who was pretty sad when they destroyed the old world to pave the way for Age of Sigmar. Not upset enough to go burning my army on YouTube or anything like that. That's somewhat over the top, to say the least. But I really like the rich history of the old world, and I was sad to see it go. I think the Mortal Realms has become a more interesting setting over time as they've developed it. But at first I felt a bit like Gotrek Gurnison emerging from the realm of chaos and looking around going, what is this? And if you felt like that, then the audio dramas they did and the new books about Gotrek going into the Mortal Realms are definitely for you. I really enjoyed them. They have Brian Blessed playing Gotrek, and he shouts Gotrek's alive. I mean, what more do you want? But it really felt like it spoke to me about trying to get me on board with the Mortal Realms. There's a couple of really good YouTube videos I've seen recently. One of them by Olden Demon talks about the transition from Fantasy to Age of Sigmar. Makes a lot of sense why they kind of stopped one and started another, and that's worth watching for sure. And then Rob, the Honest Wargamer, he's also done a really good video about the reintroduction of the old world, from his perspective of working at the company in the past. Sort of why they've made some of the decisions of keeping certain races, moving certain races over and things like that. Some of it is a bit depressing because it's a bit corporate business kind of stuff, rather than being done purely for the narrative and gameplay purposes. But that's life, I suppose, and it makes a lot of sense. But I think the thing to remember with any of those cases where they discontinue your army or they change the setting is that Games Workshop hasn't kicked in your door and nicked your models. You've still got them. I'm a bit of a hoarder, and I've got shelves and shelves of minis sitting over there. Loads of them from when I was a kid until recently. You know, just because they've released a new version of the rules doesn't mean you have to play that. You can play the old version. I mean, you can go and play old version of Fantasy. I can use my old army book. This is from the initially 4th edition, and then it applied for the 5th edition of Fantasy as well. If I get a couple of mates who want to play it, we can do that. That's fine. I mean, you could even branch out away from the Games Workshop games, if such a thing were possible. Mantic picked up loads of business with Kings of War. They picked up business initially with factions that were being not supported by Games Workshop, and then picking up more people when the setting was gone. So, you know, that is a good alternative rank and flank fantasy game. But there were more than that. You know, there's Oathmark I've got here by Joseph McCullough. He wrote Frostgrave. Frostgrave is a fantastic game. I've not played Oathmark yet, but I'm sure it'd be great because he's very good at writing rules. There's other games as well. Osprey Games do plenty of various skirmish games and all that kind of stuff, but they also have Dragon Rampant. And this is a fantasy version of Lion Rampant, which is just a short book. The rules are pretty simple, nice and concise, but it gives you a lot of scope for customization, a lot of scope for doing what you want to do. You can create any fantasy army you want using the rules here. You know, and it gives you, as long as you've got the imagination and the kind of the drive to do it, you can do something really interesting with a simple set of rules. I appreciate it can be difficult to set up a game of an old rule set or a different rule set. You know, you need to get people that are going to buy into it. Certainly down at my club, it's a lot easier to turn up with the current rule book and find an opponent and just play a game, because that's what people are mostly reading. It's difficult to remember lots and lots of different rules, stretching back into the mists of time. So I appreciate that, but it is possible. But because it's difficult to do that, then it's really good, I think, that the old world has come back, because this does give you the opportunity to play those old games and to use your old models. You know, it's a really positive thing from that point of view. Alright, whoop-de-doo. It's positive. Why is it positive? What's so cool about it? What are these old models that you're so excited to be using? Well, for me, it's these old orcs. And these HeroQuest orcs, as I said earlier, the first models I bought. Who knows where the guy acquired them from. I bought them. He was the same age as me. It wasn't some random old dude in the playground. Anyway, I snipped their bases down, put them on 25mm bases so they rank up with the rest of the orcs. So I've got those plastic models. I've got some other really old plastic models in there, which I got at Games Day once, which are, you know, they were old white plastic, these things, from a Forces of Fantasy box set. I had a mixture of all sorts of different models in there. But they just look really cool. There's a load of character there. They've got the classic ones from Warhammer Quest, which were you had the sprue of a orc archer and an orc swordsman together, and I've got a few metal ones here. And these guys, I painted these a long time ago. Classic goblin green bases, just like they used to be in the old magazines. I'm really proud of them still. They are not the best paint job you'll ever see, and maybe they're not the best models you've ever seen. Sculpting has come a long way since these were done. There's lots of new models nowadays which are really good. There's so many options out there from different companies, you know, and maybe it's nostalgia. You know, I remember getting these when I was a kid, putting a lot of care and attention into painting them, you know, whether you think it's a good paint job or not. You know, I collected them and I really love the collection. I'm not a person who follows the meta of the game. I just collect the models that I like, try and make interesting armies that will tell a good story and play fun games with my mates, you know. That's nothing against tournament players or events or whatever. It's just that's how I have always sort of engaged with the hobby. So I want to kind of continue doing that. So I want to keep my old models, and I think that my sort of approach is going to be to keep the old models looking pretty much as they are. I might touch up the bases a bit, but as you can see here, I've got some of the old models which are not painted yet because I bought some off eBay. Spent probably more money than I needed to, especially now they're on made to order, buying some of these models on eBay so I could flesh out the units to make them 2 full units of 20. And I want to paint them my question is, do I paint them in the same sort of dodgy style I painted the old ones in? I didn't paint that one, by the way. That was already painted when I bought it off eBay. But do I paint them in the old style, or do I paint them as I would paint them now? I'm not really sure what the best approach is. I don't know what will look best. I don't know. I might just paint them however I feel like at the time, and then if they all look a little bit different in the unit, that's all right. It's just a mix. I mean, overall, although the paint jobs aren't great, I think when you put them on the table and you're looking from a distance away, it's just a riot of colour. It's an exciting orc mob, and any painted model is going to look better on the tabletop than an unpainted model. So yeah, I think I just have to go for it. I've got the orc archers as well, which I really like, and they're pretty rubbish in the game. I mean, orc archers are a kind of silly idea, but they do look cool, and they're classic models. So yeah, I've got those. I've also got the ones that came in the starter set where they had a load of double-handed orcs and the newer Araboys with them. And I've done a bit of conversion work on some of these and making musicians and stuff like that. This is back in the old days when the command groups tended to be metal and more expensive. So as far as possible, we'd convert them, which you don't need to do so much nowadays. So you know, that's the core of the orc infantry really, which I'm looking at doing something with. So let me know in the comments what you reckon. What do you reckon? Paint them to the best of my ability now, which is better than it was then, or paint them in a similar style, repaint the old ones. You know, how do you go about taking an old army and updating it? And in terms of updating, I bought some of the made-to-order models recently, and I've got these ogre bulls here. I really like these models. I've got the standard bearer I bought when I was younger. I don't know why I just bought a single standard bearer. I thought it was kind of cool to have the standard bearer. I also thought he looked like a really cool model. And I was intending one day to get the rest of them, but I never quite managed to stretch my pocket money that far. I got a few other ogres. I used the Chaos Ogres and converted them, used them as a little ogre unit. But now I've got this whole mob of ogres, and you may have seen me showing these off in my Hero Quest Ogre Horde video, because they were a potential source of ogres to replace the ones in the box set there. But I think I'm just going to do something else with that Hero Quest box, and these are going to be ogres for use as mercenaries in my Orc and Goblin army, or possibly do something funny with the Troll Horde list. We'll see. Might proxy them as common trolls. That might be controversial, but might be interesting. And another controversial opinion I have is on the pricing of these made-to-order models. You can see I've got a few boxes here. I don't think they're amazingly overpriced. I think they're kind of reasonable, which sounds bizarre, but I've got this Orc Shaman and War Wyvern. I've wanted that since I was a kid and never got it. I've got some Stone Trolls in here, which I always loved, but again, was a little bit too rich for my blood. If you compare them to the plastic models nowadays, I don't think that they've been unfair in the way that they price these. I know, you can go to the economics of it and say, well, they haven't had to pay to get them sculpted nowadays. They've already made their money back in the old days. But they've brought them back, and they've allowed you to buy them cheaper than you can find them on eBay. That War Wyvern, that's crazy money on eBay. And if you compare it to some other wyverns or dragons I bought from other companies, not just Games Workshop, but other companies, it's pretty reasonable, I think, especially for a model that you've loved for a long time, like this War Wyvern. I mean, I'm probably going to get called a Games Workshop sympathiser or something, but I don't think the made-to-order prices were crazy outlandish. I thought they were, they're expensive because the hobby as a whole is expensive, but when you compare it to similar Games Workshop models nowadays and other companies, I don't think it was, out of the realms of reasonableness. Anyway, I'm just comparing here with other Wyverns, and you can see my other Wyverns are on 50mm bases, which is what it always used to be, and now you've got the 50 by 100mm base, which is the standard. And I wish that was the case when I bought that big chunk of metal on the back right there, because I built his base up with a load of lead plates to stop him from tipping over, because that was a very front heavy metal model. They do it in resin now, but it was metal. But my very first Wyvern, my first big model I ever got, was this Azag the Slaughterer, and I love the model, and it brings back great memories for me. I got it for Christmas. I was at my grandparents' house, and my parents bought me that kit. They also bought all the recommended paints, because in the old days they used to write on the back what paints you should get to copy the box art, basically. And I went for doing a bit of shading and a bit of highlighting in there, best as I could. You know, it's rough, but I was a kid, and it's the first time I was doing it. You know, maybe some washes wouldn't have gone amiss, but I really like that model. It's got a special place for me. And this next Wyvern, I call this guy Basher Big Tooth. As I say, built up with plates of lead underneath and a few extra bits of gravel on the back of the base to stop it from tipping over. It's a really cool model. I like the way they changed the Wyvern design a bit, make it a bit more, you know, the bottom lip protruding and the big belly. I'm much more happy with this model. It was quite a number of years later I painted this one. Decided to go for quite a strange, different Wyvern colour scheme that I hadn't really seen before, this kind of browny red. Yeah, if only it was on one of these longer bases. I don't think I'm going to go around rebasing it. I mean, that's one of the things. Do you think you should rebase all of your models for Old World? I don't really think so. And this one is a Wyvern from Cadwallon, Rackham, I think it was, and I got it on eBay at some point. It's the Dragon of Llanova, or something like that, and it's got a really old Orc Shaman on top of it, which actually I think was from a Trish Carden Wyvern back in the old days, which again I just acquired on eBay at some point, and seemed to sit on there quite nicely. I went for a different colour scheme, making this one red. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, it's a nice little collection of Wyverns. I've got a couple others I need to paint up. Unfortunately, I think you can only bring one Wyvern per 1,000 points in your army, which is a bit of a shame, because you have to have a war boss or a weird knob to ride it. Whereas high elves can get 3 dragons into 1,000 points, I believe. Seems a little bit unfair. Bring back the days of big bosses riding Wyverns, that's what I say. But anyway, as I said earlier, I'm a bit more of a collector and painter than a meta chaser or anything like that. So I'll collect the things that I like. I like Wyverns, so I've got a load of them. I like dragons as well. You know, Wyverns are kind of a type of dragon, sort of, maybe, but that's a whole can of worms, pun intended, that I'm not going to open, because people argue about that for days, about whether a Wyvern's a dragon or a dragon's haven't got time for that. Anyway, I will leave you with some nice pictures of dragons and Wyverns here that I've painted. Some of them are the older ones that you see here, and some of them are newer and look a bit better. But I really enjoy painting them. I'm trying to build up a whole menagerie of dragons and Wyverns and things to be able to throw into various games, D&D and Warhammer among others. But this video has gone on a bit long now, so I'll leave it there. I was going to talk a bit more about converting my armies from Warhammer Fantasy to Age of Sigmar and back again, and what to do about bases, changing from squares to rounds and all that kind of stuff. But I'll leave that for the next video, and I'll also talk about the first few games of Old World that I've had. I've been really enjoying the game itself. There are definitely some things that could be improved, I'm sure, but overall, very much enjoying it and getting these old models back on the table. So let me know what your experiences have been of doing that. You know, have you enjoyed getting your old models back on the table? Are you looking at a new army? Because I am looking at doing a new army for Old World, actually, which I'll talk about in another future video. So stick around, subscribe and all that good stuff, and hopefully I'll see you back here for the next one. Cheers. Bye.